In the previous video, we discussed how to create the bare bones of our sculpture using pipe cleaners. We talked about taking our sketch and turning it into a stick figure drawing, and that the sticks of the stick figure drawing are basically your pipe cleaners for creating the beginnings of your armature. So today, what we're going to do now is start adding some thickness. We want to bulk this up, give it some more form, and we're going to do that by wrapping our pipe cleaners in aluminum foil. So I'm going to start with a piece of aluminum foil. It's really up to you the size of aluminum foil you're going to use. In class here, I just tore off some sheets. And what you're going to do is you're going to first start by kind of lightly squishing this. You don't want to completely mash it down. You want to create kind of like a tube out of the foil that's not completely crimped down. So there's still a lot of movement here, a lot of squishing I can do. It's kind of hollow inside of there. So there's lots of air still around and inside the foil tube I just made. I start with the main body, just like I did with the pipe cleaner. I start with wrapping this. So all I'm going to simply do is take my foil and start forming it around my pipe cleaner. Now when you first start this, it feels kind of awkward, it feels kind of strange, but again, our goal is to add bulk. So when I start forming this, and when I first wrap it, there's really no form, it's definitely thicker, but I'm going to refer back to my sketch, so I need a more narrow waist, and this is why we don't completely squish down the foil to begin with, is so that I can then take this and start using the foil to help get my form. So notice I'm pinching it all the way around because I want not only form in this direction, looking at it from the side, but I also want form from the top also. So this is kind of based on my dog. He is a Chihuahua Pug mix, and he has a larger chest area and a very narrow waist. And that's what I tried to show in my sketch here, is his larger chest and his waist narrowing down. So that's what I'm going to start forming in my foil. So that is one piece. I'm going to take another. I hope that's not too loud for you. And I'm going to again create my foil tube. And I'm going to now start on the legs. So my foil will not only add thickness, but it will also add a little bit more stability. So I'm kind of, if I would compare it to anything, I'm diapering my armature. I'm taking the new piece of foil, I'm starting near the middle of it, at the back of my sculpture, and I'm going to take this new piece and I'm going to wrap it around one leg as far as I can make it go. And again, I'm not squishing too much, I'm just starting to add some bulk, and I'm going to wrap it around the other leg. And again, not squishing too much, just starting to add form. And then I'm going to take that and start compressing it down so that I can start getting a little bit better form for my sculpture. So I do want the thighs to be a little bit thicker. So as I come down the leg, I'm compressing and pressing in this foil thinner and leave it a little bit more bulky near the top. And this is going to be my entire process, as I'm going to keep on adding foil, wrapping it, checking it, now you can also tear the foil into smaller pieces. So I want to add a little bit more to this leg here. Now remember, foil is not going to stick to each other. So you will have areas where it gets a little looser, but that's okay. We are eventually covering this with paper mache, which will help stabilize our structure and our form even further. But we have no way at this point of really bonding it together. So like here where my two pieces of foil come together, it's going to be a little loose, but already with those couple pieces, notice how much more that leg has some support. It can now kind of stand there. It's not going to completely stand because this front part is not wrapped yet. But if I give it even the barest amount of support here, this leg isn't buckling. You know, this one over here is still moving around a little bit because not all of it is wrapped in foil. Now my sculpture has a wider foot. So remember, I'm kind of combining a dog form and a rabbit form here. And I'm just going to keep on wrapping my form up. Now as you're wrapping, if you do discover that you have too much foil, you know, foil will only squish down so far. If you have too much foil, you can tear some off. You can even cut it if you need to, if you can't get it to tear. So if something is too large, try to fix it so we're not wasting foil. But in the end, you know, if it's not going to work and you need to get a new piece of foil on there, carefully take the one off you just applied and apply a new piece. So I'm going to keep on wrapping him. I have one here that I was using to demonstrate with my in-class, you know, in building classes. And so I probably have about 6 to 7 pieces of foil of the size I showed you to begin with. But notice now he's standing. I don't need to hold him up or support him. And I just kept on wrapping him with pieces of foil. So I'm going to continue to work on this one, and I'll see you after I get him wrapped. Oh, and before I continue this, notice I'm keeping my sketch with me so I can constantly refer back to it as I wrap my armature. Okay, so when it comes to the head, what I find easiest is to take my sheet of foil and kind of roll in the edges all the way around. So I'm kind of forming it into a circle. And once I have the circle, then what I'm going to do is just take it, and I could probably go a little tiny bit smaller on this. I'm going to take my circle and I'm going to put, for mine, the nose into it. For some of you, it could even be the back of the head, the top of the head. Depends on the structure. And I'm going to start squishing it around. So I'm kind of starting with a larger ball shape for the head. Okay, very comical. And I'm going to continue to squish. So remember when we were talking about these before, and I said, you know, when I was making my armature, that a lot of the form of the head here is going to come in the foil part. This is what I meant. So I'm going to start squishing this down, and I want a nose area to start coming out. So I'm pushing down, pinching for like a snout area. I'm looking at the top. I want, you know, a little bit more roundness on the main skull part, a little bit more narrow down near the nose. And I want him to have some bulging eyes, but I don't want them to just stick on the outside. So I'm going to push in an area on each side for kind of like eye sockets. But I'm not going to put the eyes in with my foil armature. I'm going to wait and do the eyes when I do the clay over top. Okay, so he's standing on his own. I'm getting a little bit closer to my sketch form. And I'm just going to continue to wrap. Now the only thing I may not wrap is the ears. I may leave these just as pipe cleaners for now, because I don't want the ears to be too thick. If I do put any foil on them, it's going to be a very, very thin piece, and that will just be maybe to fill in the gap here a little bit with it. Now his front feet I haven't wrapped yet. I may just wait to do those also with the paper mache layer. Because they're smaller, I don't want them to get too chunky. So if I do, again, add any foil to them, it's going to be a small amount. He's a little loose back here, so I may add a little bit more foil also to thicken up the waist a little bit more. Doesn't need too much more thickness, but it's a little bit too skinny for my liking, and his head wobbles a little tiny bit, so if I do anything I might add a little tiny piece of foil around there to help stabilize it some. I'm also beginning to look at all my angles, so I'm checking him from the back. I want to see if I like the shape of the hips and so forth back here. Not too bad. I may add a little bit more, and I need to shape some of these legs a little bit more. So I want to get it as close to the shapes and thicknesses I want in the foil stage, because the paper mache and the clay eventually that we will add are just going to be skin layers that just give it a more finished look. So they're not going to really add too much more to the form of this sculpture. So I want as much of the form established through my foil layer as possible. So that's what I'm going to continue to work on, is just continuing to add foil and checking my forms. Okay, so that is my beginning layers. Sorry, that is my final layers to my armature. So, there is a little bit of pipe cleaner showing here and there, but I think I have the body positioned fairly close to how I had it in my sketch. The head may be a little bit more upright than I originally intended, but it's fairly close. He will stand now on his own, and I've kind of checked it from all angles. Now remember, as I said, foil will not stick to each other, so anytime you add little tiny pieces to adjust the shape, realize that they're going to be a little loose until we get the wrapping done in the paper mache. So that though gives our sculpture some bulk and some volume, and we'll clean it up by adding the paper mache over top to give it a little bit more of a cleaner look before eventually putting our final clay layer over top of the paper mache. So that is making your armature. As seen in the previous video, we first started with pipe cleaners. We made our sketch into a stick figure, and then I constantly had my sketch visible so that I could add the thickness where I needed it to create volume in my sculpture. Now, small things like my planned spikes, that I'll wait to put into my final layer of clay. So my previous example that I had shown you, this part on the top of the bird here, this was added solely in clay, what some of you call a mohawk, okay? That was solely done in clay. So it has no foil or pipe cleaner underneath it. It was just all clay, okay? So small details like my spikes can be done in clay. So that is it for this video. I'm done with my armature, and my next step and the next video will be in working with paper mache.